She stood at the firing line, the cold metal of the Glock pressed against her palm as the wind whipped her braids behind her. The colonel surveyed her skeptically, lips curling into that familiar half-smirk that spelled disbelief. "You sure you know how to use that?" he asked, voice low enough only she could hear. Her dark eyes didn't waver. She'd been training for months, but this moment felt like a lifetime compressed into a heartbeat. "Yes, sir," she replied, voice steady. She was 15, but the steel in her gaze made it seem as though she'd faced a lifetime of obstacles. "Already?" The colonel shook his head. "Fine, but don't say I didn't warn you." He backed away, folding his arms, and the range fell silent except for the distant blinking of targets. She took a deep breath, let it out slowly, and lifted, a Glock to shoulder level. Her finger found the trigger, and she squeezed gently, not too hard, not too soft. The shot echoed, and the paper silhouette split neatly through the center. Her heart pounded, but her posture never wavered. The colonel's eyes narrowed. He approached. "Not bad, but that was from 10 yards. His tone was almost teasing. "Let's try 20. He raised the target further back. She squared her stance again, shifting her weight slightly onto her front foot. She exhaled and fired. 2 shots bull's eyes. The colonel's jaw unclenched. Interesting. He tapped his watch. "Time's up for this session. Back in 10. The others filed off, tossing shells onto the ground. She stayed put, already unpacking her ear protection to check her grip. 10 minutes later, they returned. The colonel cleared his throat. "You ready?" She nodded. She'd been waiting for this. 10 yards, 20 yards she'd nailed each. 1. Now it was time for 30. The colonel eyed her, and then his clipboard. He scribbled something. "My records show the current junior SEAL marksmanship record at 30 yards is 92 out of 100. You think you can beat that?" She smiled, the first real smile she'd allowed herself since arriving at Camp Pendleton. "Yes, sir." They retreated to the observation tower and signaled the target carrier to move back another 10 yards. 30 yards loomed between her. And the bull's eye? She had 30 rounds left, 1 for each second she'd been alive times. Well, it didn't really matter. She'd been born a second after midnight on her birthday. She raised the Glock again, heart steady, mind clear. She fired round after round, 1 edge of the bull's eye, 2 perfect center, 3 just outside the kill zone, 4 bull's eye, 5 center, and on and on. Each shot echoed in her ears. Each shot was a promise she'd made to herself, to never let anyone deem her incapable because of her color, her age, or her gender. The colonel watched through binoculars. He ducked as the 10th shot rang out. "Not bad," he muttered, but his voice carried enough for her to hear. She acknowledged with a nod only. She had 60 left. By shot 20, she'd hit 95, but then she slipped just slightly on. Shot 21. It barely nicked the bull's eye, but he noted it. She paused, reset, took a breath, and resumed. By the time she fired shot 50, she was at a perfect score. The colonel snapped his binoculars shut and trudged down to the line. "Only 50 more?" he said, challenge clear in his tone. She didn't answer. She reloaded and continued. The wind had picked up, but she compensated, adjusting her aim. Round 72 gave her the new SEAL record, and she allowed herself a small grin. But there were still 28 rounds left. She continued, and by shot 80, she was at 100%. The colonel stepped forward again, checking his watch. 10 minutes left, he said. She nodded, eyes never leaving the target dot, and 90 shots she was at. Let's see, 90? No, 92. Exactly the SEAL Junior record. She inhaled, let it out, and aimed for shot 93. Click. No fire. Misfeed. She cursed under her breath, swapped magazines, and didn't let the fumble shake her. Shot 93 rang out clean. She was back on track. 4 rounds left. She squeezed. Shot 94, bullseye. 95 center. 96, quarter millimeter off center. Shot 97, perfect. Shot 98, perfect. 99, perfect. 99, perfect. And then the final shot. 100, perfect center. She stepped back. The colonel snapped his fingers. Unbelievable. He checked his clipboard. 100 out of 100. You just shattered the record by 8 points. His eyes were wide, and for the first time she saw genuine respect in them. Who are you? He asked quietly. She looked at him, half-smile returning. I'm just a kid who loves shooting, sir. He slapped the clipboard against his palm. You're something else. She'd always been fascinated by weapons. Not violence, but the mechanics, the precision. Growing up in Baltimore, she had watched in awe as her uncle, a former Marine, walked through the house polishing his rifle. She'd asked to hold it once, and he taught her the parts: barrel, slide, trigger, magazine. He'd let her dry fire. No ammunition. She felt powerful, focused. That day planted a seed. Her parents were strict, church-going, and wary of guns. But they also saw how her eyes lit up talking about shooting. When she was 12, they arranged a session at a local range. She was the only person under 18 there. The instructor squinted when she signed the waiver. You know what you're doing? He asked. She nodded. He taught her basics: stance, grip, breath control. It was like a dance, each element moving in harmony. She practiced until her hands ached, and the instructor finally told her to rest. But she couldn't stop thinking about it. She borrowed money to buy dry fire targets and spent hours in her backyard practicing dot in the months leading up to Camp Pendleton. She raised funds by doing odd jobs: mowing lawns, babysitting, tutoring younger kids in math. She saved every penny, bought a used Glock, ear protection, targets, and headed west. She live-streamed her progress on social media under the alias Shadowshot, inspiring thousands of followers, mostly other girls of color, who saw in her someone who defied expectations. Her ultimate goal was to qualify for SEAL training. But before that, she needed to show she had the marksmanship. Breaking the junior record was the first step. When news of her feat reached the mainland press, headlines exploded. Teen prodigy smashes SEAL record. Baltimore girl rewrites shooting history. The colonel, an old-school type, had been all too happy to welcome the press on base to showcase a success story. Reporters crowded around her, flashbulbs firing. She answered questions calmly, crediting her uncle and her determination. That evening, a banquet was held in her honor. She entered in dress blues, boots polished, hair neatly tied. The colonel stood at the head table, rising to toast her. Today, he said, we witnessed something extraordinary. You remind us that talent and grit come from the most unexpected places. We couldn't be prouder to have you here. She accepted the plaque they presented, an engraved shot bullet in a glass. Case and mouthed thank you to him. Afterward, reporters asked what was next. Qualify for Bud S, she said. Their jaws dropped. The basic underwater demolition SEAL course was one of the toughest in the military world. Few civilians attempted it. Fewer still passed. But she'd already broken the marksmanship barrier. Now she had to conquer Hell Week, the swims, the runs, the dives. She trained 6 days a week. Dawn runs on the beach, pool sessions in gear, cold water immersions. Her body hurt all the time, but she welcomed the pain. It was proof she was pushing limits. She studied every detail of the SEAL ethos: honor, courage, commitment. She meditated on it internalized it. Every push-up, every mile, every breath underwater felt like forging herself into something stronger. The day of her Bud S-Class 283 assessment arrived. Thousands applied, but only 200 would be selected. She stood among the candidates, young, men from all branches, hardened, confident. She felt outnumbered, but she also felt ready. They began the physical tests: pull-ups, push-ups, sit-ups, runs. Her scores matched the top percentile. She moved on to the swim test: 500 yards in combat gear, then a 4-mile ocean swim. The cold water bit her skin, but she found rhythm. Stroke, breathe, stroke, breathe. Before she knew it, she'd finished. Next came a mental exam, stressful, disorienting tasks under sleep deprivation. She found clarity in chaos, compartmentalized the noise, and emerged with near-perfect marks. Finally, they announced the results. She heard her name: Petty Officer Candidate Ariana Taylor. She exhaled. Mission 1 accomplished. Hell Week came. Next, a blur of land and sea torture. They ran 20 miles in the sand. They carried logs strapped to their shoulders for hours, each log heavier than the last. They swam through freezing surf with hypothermia lurking in every wave. They barely slept 2 hours total over 5 days. Sleep deprivation hallucinations stalked the edges of her mind. Her body screamed to stop, but she remembered every sacrifice: the afternoons tutoring kids, the nights spent dry firing in her garage, the disbelief in her parents' eyes when she announced her goals. On day 4, during the infamous surf torture, she was soaked to the bone. The drill instructors barked orders. The waves pounded her. A fall knocked her mask off. Salt stung her eyes. She coughed water, but refused to quit. She resurfaced, found her mask, put it back on. Log carry resumed. 2 hours later, they collapsed. On the sand, she lay there, viscerally exhausted. But she lay there with everyone else who refused to quit. Mutual respect grew among them. By Sunday morning, she and 50 other candidates, down from 200, stood before the officers for the graduation call. The officers asked about commitment, reminded them that real SEALs never quit. Then came the call. Names not called. Report to the officer. One by one, they were dropped. Her name wasn't called. She stood tall. They announced the graduates. Ariana Taylor, among 49 others. She marched forward, boots meeting sand, and received her trident pin. The instructor pinned it on. "Welcome to the most elite special operations force in the world," he said. She placed her hand over the trident. In that moment, every doubt, every hurtful laugh, every barrier melted away. Her story traveled fast. Congress invited her to speak at a hearing on youth empowerment. Profiles appeared in major magazines. She used her platform to advocate for greater access to firearm safety training in underprivileged communities. She started the Taylor Trust, offering scholarships for girls of color to attend ranges and camps. The colonel, now a career mentor, often called her, "Taylor, how's Hell Week debrief treating you?" He'd ask. She laughed and told him about the new challenges: jump school, advanced tactics, sniper school. He listened with pride. A year later, she returned to Camp Pendleton, this time as Officer Taylor leading a SEAL platoon. At the range she once broke records, she now coached young candidates. She remembered the colonel's half-smirk. Now she greeted newcomers the same way he did, with disciplined high standards, but with an open mind to potential where others saw none. One afternoon she noticed a slender figure at the line, a young black girl, barely 15, adjusting her grip. Taylor walked over, introduced herself, and offered pointers. The girl shot, and the target split. Taylor smiled, seeing herself in those eyes. The colonel, seated nearby, watched, and then stood, applauding quietly. She met his gaze, and he gave a respectful nod. Years later, standing in front of a packed auditorium at West Point, Ariana Taylor closed her speech. We break records not to bask in glory, but to shatter the expectations that hold others back. Your potential isn't defined by who you are today, but by who you refuse to let yourself become. The audience rose. The colonel, now a retired general, beamed from the front row. She had done more than break a record. She'd broken barriers. And though she was now a legend in her own right, she never forgot that 15-year-old girl, clock in hand, ready to rewrite history with each shot.